Hey guys, I'm gonna start a new series on the channel while we're all kind of in quarantine over the next couple of weeks. I'm a big proponent, as you know, if you've ever attended any of my Bible study classes, in daily Bible reading. And I think it's a great idea to begin each new year starting in the book of Genesis and working your way through, right through Revelation, so that you get through the Bible reading it complete from end to end in a 1 year period. And it's really not too hard to do. Very simple. There's reading plans that you can use. Many ways to do it. Just reading 4 chapters a day, you'll get through it much faster than 1 year. Anyway, in my normal Bible reading every day, I'm up in the book of 1 Kings chapter 17. And I just thought it would be interesting that as I read my chapters each day to come and bring you just some thoughts on what I'm reading, what I'm meditating on each morning. And you can be following along with me as we read through these chapters, or just take these ideas and maybe God will inspire you some way through what he shows me as I start to think about his word. So this is not a Bible study, but just a real quick meditation on morning Bible readings. So 1 Kings chapter 17, if you're not familiar with it, it is a chapter that introduces us to Elijah the Tishbite, who was a prophet of the Lord in the time of Ahab, a king in Israel, a wicked king in Israel. And God calls for a famine to come upon the land, that there would be no rain or dew for 3 years. Elijah told the king, accepted his word. And God brings this drought upon the land and commands Elijah to go to the brook Cherith to wait out part of the drought there, and says that he will feed him by the ravens, bringing him both meat and bread on a daily basis. Then later on, after that brook dries up, he sends him to a widow in Zarephath to provide for him there until the time when the drought is going to be ended and rain would come upon the land. And as I was thinking about this, there was a few thoughts that occurred to me. One, God brought this drought into the land. He had planned for it, and he was using it as a judgment against Israel for their idolatry, and Ahab especially for leading the nation into even greater idolatry. But as he was bringing this drought upon the whole society, God made provision for his people to be able to endure the drought. Now we see what's happening with Elijah here and how God provides for him. But in other parts, as we read through these chapters, we're going to see how God provided for others, not just Elijah, and in very different and unique ways. So the first thing to know is that if you're following God, sometimes he will lead us into a period of difficulty, like we're all going through right now with this coronavirus scare that's in the country. But when he brings us into these places, that he always brings provision as well. And the provision that he provided for Elijah was for ravens to feed him, and it's not a bird that is known to be very sociable. God uses an unlikely source to provide for Elijah. And then later on, he sent him to a poor widow. Again, someone who doesn't have an excess, someone who you wouldn't think would be a source of provision that God uses to keep the prophet alive during this period of drought. So the key to unlocking this great provision, or the requirement, I should say, is better than a key, was Elijah's obedience. God told him to go to the brook, and he had to go to the brook. When he went there, he found that God's provision was awaiting for him. When that dried up, God then told him to go to Zarephath and go to a widow. Elijah didn't try to figure out God's plan. He didn't look at what God was doing and saying, wait a minute, ravens are going to feed me? That's stupid. They won't work. Or a widow is going to feed me. She can't even feed herself. God, how's that going to work? He trusted God enough to be God and allow him to provide through these unlikely sources. And especially in the case of the widow, Elijah's obedience not only provided for Elijah, but also gave provision to the widow and her son through his obedience. So what can we take away from all of this? That in times of stress, times of disaster, God will watch over his people and he will provide for them. that provision may come from unlikely sources, sources that we don't expect can provide for us. But with God in the background, anything can become a likely source. And our requirement then is to just trust God in obedience. And as we move through that, we'll find a blessing for ourselves as well as be a blessing to others. I hope you enjoy these little talks. We're going to try to do this on a daily basis as we move forward, as the Lord gives grace. And I wish you all a very blessed day. Thank you.